In today's show, we're talking addition by subtraction, or moreover, why the Blazers have played better without Anfernee Simons and Deandre Ayton in the lineup. Welcome to Locked On Blazers. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Trailblazers, your daily Portland Trailblazers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's up, world? It's your past first point guard and Trailblazers reporter, Mike Richmond. You are listening to another episode of Locked On Blazers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, available wherever you get podcasts and also on YouTube. Thanks for making this show your first listen, coming at you each and every weekday, Monday through Friday. So make it a part of your daily routine. Make it your first listen. Tell your friends to do the same. It's Locked On Blazers, your team every day. In today's show, we're talking addition by subtraction. I don't even think that's necessarily what's going on, but I think the topic on the tip of everyone's tongues in Blazer land is, doesn't this team look better without Anfernee Simons or Deandre Ayton? And is that a coincidence? And what do they do if that is indeed a certifiable truth from here on out? So in today's show, that's what we're going to talk about. Why have the Blazers played better without those two gentlemen? Is there a solution on the horizon that involves trading one or both of them? The challenges with that, and where the Blazers move forward in terms of decision-making based on where they are in terms of their rebuild. That's what we're going to do all of today. Many of you have posed some version of this question to me, either via email, lockedonblazerspod@gmail.com, or in YouTube comments, or some of you in my text messages, or some of you to my face at Pickup Basketball. Basically, the idea being that the Blazers have undeniably looked better without Anfernee Simons and Deandre Ayton in the lineup. And that is factually true. Like, let's start there and call a spade a spade. This has been the best stretch of Blazers basketball this season, and it has coincided with an absence from Deandre Ayton, and has also coincided with mostly an absence. Anfernee Simons played 5 minutes of one game of Anfernee Simons. I think this has been the best stretch for the Blazers, period. I don't think that's debatable, and I don't think it's debatable that those two gentlemen haven't participated. Those are the facts, right? It's been 3 games. I think that's the first thing we need to say. This is 3 games. Any 3-game sample size throughout the season is like inherently not meaningful because it suggests that there are 79 other games, but it's even in the tiny, microscopic 1 week of sample size, the fact that they've played better is impossible to deny. It is impossible to deny. And real quick, I'm not going to spend much time on this because I don't think it's worth really addressing. Some of you think that these injuries are quote unquote suspicious or sketchy or a lie. Get out of here. You watched Anfernee Simons go through some sort of medical event on the court. You think the Blazers paid for acting classes for that to happen? And players get hurt. DeAndre Ayton's wearing a splint on the sidelines. Like, NBA dudes don't want to fake injuries in freaking November for their basketball team. It's like Occam's razor. What's the most simple explanation here? They're hurt and they're sick. The end. That's all. So I think the why are they better is probably more interesting than are these injuries fake? Although shout out to anyone fitting themselves for a tinfoil hat right now, themselves or their family members. It's been 3 games, but they've been better. And so why have they been better? The simplest explanation for this is that they're just bigger. They're bigger and they're not playing as many negative defenders. If you put Anfernee Simons on the court, Ant has struggled this year, right? He's struggled. And so some of that is just you're kind of a high volume dude shooting bricks, right? That's and DeAndre Ayton has struggled as well this season. Just his counting numbers have been way down relative to particularly his stretch last year when he was much stronger towards the end of the season. But even beyond those guys just struggling, right? It is the Blazers just they're able, without Anfernee Simons in the lineup, they're able to play bigger, and they're not playing multiple negative defenders out on the court at the same time, particularly in the backcourt. So one of the things the Blazers did was they ditched the super big starting lineup with like Tumani and Denny playing the wings and like Tumani functionally playing shooting guard and having Denny in that starting group because they couldn't score. That lineup just couldn't score over the course of 10 games that they started. And so they moved Shaedon Sharpe into the starting group, which they needed to do. And he was like, first of all, they need him for like investment purposes, but also just needed more offensive creation. But when you do that, like Sharpe is just not a very good defender in his career. He has some tools that you think he might eventually end up being a good defender, or at least like a neutral defender. I think he's more likely to end up being like a neutral defender that's able to play in a lot of lineups because he's the right sort of size to get away with. But right now, he's not a very good defender. Scoot Henderson, while he's taken, I think, significant strides as an on-ball defender this season, is straight up bad as an off-ball defender. He's bad. His rotations are bad. He gets caught ball watching. So sometimes he doesn't help in the right place, and sometimes he's watching the ball and his man can cut and get open or find an open spot to spot up. Like Scoot struggles in off-ball defense. He's straight up bad at it. And Anfernee Simons is a well-documented bad defender. So if you're playing more lineups with Simons next to Sharpe and Simons next to Henderson, you're playing more lineups with two negative defenders, multiple negative defenders. So one of the simple things that they've played a little bit better probably this week is because they're just playing less lineups with bad defensive players. They got a bunch of dudes who can guard. More Denny, who's a good defender, more Tumani, who's a good defender. I think Jeremy Grant's been very good on defense to begin this season. More Ryan Rupert, more Chris Murray, guys who can defend. Delano Banton for I think some of his struggles as a defensive player has been a very active as a playmaker on defense, just using his length and being coming away with steals and creating turnovers. Like the Blazers have been a high turnover team this week, forcing a bunch of turnovers with this group. Just that alone, why are they better? They're playing bigger, more positive defensive lineups, and just less weak points to exploit. If you can exploit multiple weak points, you have to help. You're helping off of people. You're creating better shots. You're creating better opportunities. There's just you're having less problems to solve. On Ayton's part, like Rob Williams is just better than him. He's just better than him. Maybe some people don't think that because they love points, points, but I feel strongly and have said a bunch in this podcast that Rob Williams is the Blazers' best big man. And when Ayton's on the court because of his paycheck and what they've sort of invested in trading for him, and because Rob can't play 35 minutes, Ayton's going to play 29 plus, right? He's going to play 29 plus. And he's not as good a defender. He's not as good of a passer. He is not as good of a positively impactful basketball player, although he's a much better shooter. He's a much better offensive scorer. I'm not even sure he's better for a team's offense right now, but he's certainly a better individual. Like you can give him the ball and he can score and he can put it in the basket from 18 feet better than Rob. But beyond, like, even if you think they're relatively similar, sure. It complicates the lineup such that the Blazers were playing at least 5 minutes a night with both Rob Williams and Donovan Clingan on the court. Negative spacing, not a particularly an impactful defensive lineup, even though you have two big giant defenders in there, but they're like each, playing out of position, so you're not getting the most out of it. They only played it very briefly, but one night it was kind of bad. They got outscored by 4 points. The other night it was like horrendous, outscored by 14 over the course of 5 minutes. The lineup just makes more sense without having to play three centers. And the Blazers are rightfully trying to sort of shoehorn Donovan Clingan in there if he's going to, every single night he's going to play. I think while it is a little bit clunky, is the right move. Ayton is going to play if he's healthy. Anfernee Simons is going to play if he's going to be healthy. And without Ant, they've had more defensive groupings, more big long wings. Size matters in the league, and then they've been playing their two better defensive centers, and I think they've just playing their better center in Rob Williams. Rob can't play every night. One of the games that they won, he straight up didn't even play, and they won by going small a little bit with multiple wings. And Donovan Clingan played the freaking game of his life, and that's gets back to the point. It's been 3 games. There's just outlier nights in this. A crazy shooting night on Tuesday. Donovan Clingan playing the best game of maybe any rookie all season long. I know Zach Edey had like a 25 and 12 night, but Clingan blocked 5 shots in the fourth quarter of a game. He was bonkers. 17, 12, and 8. He was good. He was really, really, really stinking good. 3 games. It's a small sample size. So I think some of the why is better defense. Some of the why is just better players. The rotation makes more sense. And also Shaedon Sharpe has gone nuts. He's played probably his best back-to-back games of any stretch of his career. His first ever back-to-back 30-point games, a career high against Minnesota, and then followed that up with just 1 point less the following game, including 24 in the second half and the final 11 Blazers points. Dude, hooping. He's playing really well. Again, 3 games. If you play 3 games, you allow for these, I don't know if this is a crazy outlier for Shaedon Sharpe. Maybe this is who he is. Maybe he's a guy who, if needs to do as much as he's being asked to do on offense right now, can score a relatively simple 30. But he's playing really well, so you don't miss as much of the creation stuff. That's the why the Blazers are playing better. That's the why. Small sample size, lineups make more sense. Those 2 dudes were struggling to begin with. You play lineups that makes more sense and are more effective. You shorten the sample size to not very many games, and Shaedon Sharpe goes nuts in a couple of them, and Donovan Clingan has a really special game, and there was an outlier shooting night, the best shooting night of any team in the NBA all season. You can have some success, right? I don't think that totally negates what we've seen. The Blazers look a little faster. The Blazers look like they're playing with a little more verve. It is, I think, people said the ball movement's been better. I'm not even sure that's true. I think the ball's gone in a little bit more often. I think they've had less terrible shooting nights, so it feels like, the passes are more effective because you remember the passes that lead to buckets more than the passes that lead to bricks. But I think the speed and the pace is noticeably a little bit faster, and the defense has been able to play in a bunch of different ways and be effective, and force a cajillion turnovers against the Hawks, and shut Rudy Gobert down inside, and send 2 to the ball against a bunch against Anthony Edwards, and not get burned because you're on the backside. You also have big wings. The personnel matters. The reason that they've been better is because the personnel has made more functional sense. You're playing players who are slightly better in Rob Williams, and you're playing more positive defensive players. So what everyone's screaming is, trade these dudes, trade them, because clearly they're better. And while I think they have been better, the obvious small sample size caveats, it isn't that simple. So let's talk about what a trade looks like. Because when you're talking about addition by subtraction, it might be really addition by addition, because Rob Williams and Shaedon Sharpe have also come back during while these guys, and have played more while these guys have been out. But addition by some other addition. Addition by subtraction by addition. I think actually it's some transitive property stuff. But if you're screaming trade him, I think there's some realities the Blazers are going to bump up against, and also they walked themselves down this path as well. Both of those things can be true at once. That's the beauty of it all. Multiple things can be true. Join me. Let's talk trades and the multiple truths facing the Trail Blazers in that second segment. First, though, I want to tell you about PrizePicks. It's the number one way to play daily fantasy sports. You're not going to have more fun playing daily fantasy sports anywhere else, because right now on PrizePicks, you can win up to 100 times your money with as little as 4 correct picks. It's the best way to get action on sports, and it's available in over 30 states, including California, Florida, Georgia, Texas, and the state of Oregon. Plus, PrizePicks invented the flex play, which means you can still cash out even if your lineup isn't perfect. You can still double your money even if one of your picks doesn't hit. Here's how it works. You can join over 10 million members who are winning billions of dollars in prizes, in prize money. You just pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 100 times your cash. So download the app today and use the code LOCKEDONNBA. You get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Download the app today and use the code LOCKEDONNBA to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks. Run your game. All right. So I think there's some truth to the fact that the Blazers have been better without Deandre Ayton and Anfernee Simons. I think there's some factual truth to it. We've watched it play itself out on the court, albeit with some clear caveats to anyone who's willing to embrace the reality that we're 1 week removed. I think I didn't mention, which I think is part of this, and I think this is an important part of it, but last Sunday, I'm recording this on Monday evening, listen to Tuesday, November 19th show. Happy birthday to my sister-in-law who's not listening. If last Sunday, 2 Sundays ago, Blazers lose by 45 to the Memphis Grizzlies. And that following Monday, they have like a big meeting at the practice facility. Some would call it a practice, but they just like stayed in the film room. Chauncey Billups led the discussion. Everybody weighed in, hearing the Blazers players talk about it. This was when folks kind of aired their grievances, said what they needed to say, called their teammates out, spoke the hard truths about the position they were in and say, like, 11 games into the season, this can't stand. There's 71 more of these things. We can't be quitting in the middle of the first quarter against some team. And they kind of like had their moment, their come together moment. So they were going to be more focused naturally. This was going to be the week where focus didn't wane, where effort didn't wane, and all of those things, right? Skill is skill, and I think the why I explained in the first segment is kind of the basketball stuff that goes into it. But there's also some just sort of like natural. You knew they were going to play harder and smarter this week, even if the shots didn't go in, but then the shots went in at an exceedingly high level. But you kind of got the boost from the from the nadir of the season to this point. They were able to. The way to get out of the hole is to stop digging, and they stopped digging. So, regardless, we've seen them play better. All of those things, and the what you hear from the sort of like reduce everything to one sentence social media crowd. Shout out to my posters out there. Is like, trade them. You got to trade them. For who and for what, y'all? It is not that simple. So I think some of the reality of the challenge of trading Anfernee Simons and Deandre Ayton, which I've mentioned many times, shout out to my everydayers, you've heard me say this before, is that they make a bunch of money. Deandre Ayton is making like $35 million bucks. Anfernee Simons making $25 million. I don't think prior to this season where Ant has been pretty bad, I don't think Ant's money was crazy. Deandre Ayton's money's pretty big. For what he is as, like a slightly below average starting center, $35 million is a ton. His market is, let's start with Anfernee Simons. Anfernee Simons was always going to have a limited trade market based on his archetype, right? Look around the league, the Tyler Heroes, the Jordan Pooles, the Terry Roziers, it's these combo guards who are not quite point guards, who can't defend at a high level, that is just not a valuable asset around the league. What people want size, they want defenders, they want playmaking. Anfernee Simons at his best, and I think over the last 2 seasons we've probably seen him at his best, is a high volume, above average efficiency player. So he's going to take a bunch of shots and he's going to make them at above average efficiency. And then that's where the value comes from. He had some down months last year in January and February, but he was really, really stinking good in December, and he kind of found it again in March. And overall, on the whole, even though he was less efficient than the prior season, he was a high volume and slightly above average efficiency guard. There's a market for that to some extent, but even that is limited. Even the best version of Anfernee Simons, which he has very clearly not been this season, has a limited market, right? It's the truth of it. And I think it's more to do with the type of player he is than the money. The money matters more for me looking at Anfernee Simons, not in the it's too much cash, but in the fact that it is next year's the final year in his contract. So if you are trading for him, you kind of got to commit to him. It's a team that would want to re-sign Anfernee Simons. Do you want to trade for his bird rights and have him be part of the plan moving forward? So it's like, in doing this trade, are you committing to a certain path, right? That kind of is part of the calculation here. But Ant at his dollar figure I don't think it was that big of a deal when he was playing well, but he hasn't played well at the beginning of the season. He hasn't played well. He's been bad. About the same volume, but the efficiency has just really not been there. And he doesn't have value in other ways. He has to be a high volume, high efficiency player. And he hasn't been, he's just shooting 30% from 3. And he's struggling. That's real. And so that is also a challenge. So that's a challenge. DeAndre Ayton's contract, it's just big money, right? It's $30 million, $34 million, $35 million bucks for a league average center. DeAndre Ayton, when he was traded from the Phoenix Suns, was traded for Yusuf Nurkic, Nasir Little, and Grayson Allen. And the Suns had to throw in an intriguing draft prospect who you may remember, he wears 33 on the Portland Trailblazers, in order to get off DeAndre Ayton's money. His trade value has not gone up since he left Phoenix. He has not become more valuable trade assets since he left Phoenix. When he left Phoenix, he didn't go for draft picks. He didn't really go for intriguing young players. He went for a cheaper version of frustrating below average starting center shooter and like dude who's no longer in the league. His trade value hasn't gone up since then. That's just the truth of it. These dudes never had like intriguing trade value. I've been banging the drum right here on this very podcast that the Blazers should have been exploring trades for Anfernee Simons since February. When they chose not to, like since the trade deadline last February, when they chose not to do that, and they chose not to do that this summer, they put themselves in this position. Not that they knew he was going to struggle. That's just a whole nother layer of the onion. But like, it is hard to trade big money contracts in the league. So Deandre Ayton has limited trade value. Anfernee Simons has limited trade value, and there are limited teams that are even able to be involved in these type of conversations due to the new punitive situation of the CBA. If you're over the second apron, you can't even aggregate salaries. So the truly expensive teams, the Phoenixes and the Milwaukees and the Bostons of the world, like they can't even put together a package using multiple players to trade for one player. And also teams over the first apron and above, that's the first apron is if you were into the luxury tax and $7 million over the luxury tax line. So like these are expensive teams, typically teams that compete and move into the playoffs are luxury tax teams. It's very hard to field a competitive team that's not a luxury tax team. Teams that are in that first apron, they can't take back more money than they send out. They either have to send out more money or the salary has to match 100% or less. They can't take back more money in a trade than they send out. So it's hard for a bunch of teams to play ball. There was reporting from Brian Windhorst of ESPN talking about the Bucks calling around and trying to find trades, and their situation as a really expensive team basically made it so they could not find a meaningful trade at this early stage in the season to upgrade the roster. And I think that's just going to be the truth for a lot of teams. It's not every team. It's not like there's going to be no trades, but I think it has become harder to trade big money contracts than it has been in the past. And in the early stages of this new CBA, as teams are still kind of figuring out how to navigate it, that might be heightened. And so that's the reality of it. And I want to say this. Actually, I'll save it for the third segment. The way the Blazers do business matters here. When you're yelling about trades, how the team does business and the impacts of it matters. Let's talk about that to close the show. Plus a little bit of Rob Williams talk and a question from a listener. A more specific question from a listener because the listeners have been asking the questions I'm trying to answer in the show all friggin' week. Okay, join me in the third segment, won't ya? First, though, let me tell you about FanDuel. It's America's #1 sportsbook and an official sportsbook partner of the NFL, and you can tackle NFL action right now. I'm recording this during Monday Night Football. Your boy Cooper Rush is out there being not very good. So say you want to make some bets against fading beloved quarterback Cooper Rush. Well, right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sports app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place, so you can fade Cooper Rush all from the comfort of your couch and all on the same screen where you place your bets. You're going to be able to find the latest stats and view the latest play-by-play and so much more on an app that's super easy to use. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports book partner of the NFL. All right, still a pass first point guard. I'm still Mike Richmond. You are still listening to Locked On Blazers. So I think I addressed the challenges of trading these guys. There's the reality of the league, there's the reality of their general trade market, and then there's the reality of the freaking team making the decision. I think it is easy for folks like me, armchair analysts, and I actually did this. I am sitting in an armchair, quite frankly, right now. I am indeed, when I record this podcast, I'm sitting in an armchair. I'm sitting in kind of a desk chair, really. But armchair analysts, friends in your group chat, dude you play ball with, like, to just say, your Aunt Sally, whoever it might be, just say, like, the Blazers just got to trade him. They got to trade him for anything. Well, I think there's some challenges to trading them for anything, period. And two, Portland, by the Portland Trail Blazers, by not choosing not to explore trades in any meaningful way for Anfernee Simons in February and in the offseason, choosing not to explore trades in any meaningful way for Deandre Ayton. I don't know that they could in February and then again in the offseason. It's like they've chosen this path. this is the path they walked. They chose to walk down this road. They chose to practice patience. And I think I will say that, like, in the greater scheme of like Portland media market, I'm probably the person who is most vocal and anti-patience vocalist. So certainly there are other outlets where you can hear people say that like the Blazers are practicing patience and being smart and all these things, right? So I understand that maybe I'm going against the grain, but like I have been banging the drum for this patience thing to just... Patience only works if you pull it off. Otherwise, you waited too long. And with trades, I think you'd rather be early than late. But certainly, like the Blazers, they've made some moves that have been effective, and yada yada yada. And I'm also an idiot. So like all of those things are true. But here's the other truth here. The Blazers are not incentivized to take a bad deal to just ship Anfernee Simons out of town and ship Deandre Ayton out of town for nothing, right? For nothing. Maybe there's a point where they walk up against it and they realize that the trade market is so poor that they're going to have to take a bad deal, and they try to take the best version of a bad deal. But there's no incentive for them to rush and like, you know, most people point to December 15th when many trade restrictions get lifted across players who are signed in the offseason. And really it happens more so in January. But Mark Stein of the Steinline likes to point out that usually within the first month after December 15th, we get at least one trade, and things really heat up again around the trade deadline. But like, the Blazers aren't incentivized in a month to like immediately trade these dudes for a bad deal. I don't think these 3 games have suggested that they would do that. And taking a bad deal is how you lose your job. If the Blazers front office has been allowed by ownership to preach patience and work their vision slowly at the pace that they feel is best for building this roster, rushing because of 3 games of saying like, hey, do we just look better this other way, is just, it's irresponsible. And moreover, it's not how they've done business. So like, I think you can yell they should do business a certain way. Certainly I spend a lot of time yelling into this microphone about the way that I believe they should do business. But I think like, just as like a reality check and maybe a dose of cold water for me as well, is like, that's not how they do it. It's not how they do it. So I don't, like, you can't rush into a bad deal just for the sake of a deal. And also deals are going to be hard to come by. That's the truth. Quickly, I'll close the show on this thought. Listener Sam has sent me a bunch of emails over the last couple of days. We've been going back and forth on email. Good to talk to you, listener Sam. Sam kind of posed this idea. It's like, you know, Deandre Ayton hasn't been great this year. The Blazers are playing better without him. What if the Blazers committed to Rob Williams and he's the center of the future? And I think this is part of the conversation, right? It's like when you look at Anfernee Simons, you're thinking like, what if Shaedon Sharpe was the guard of the future? What if they committed to Scoot and Shea? What if they, you know, and I think this is all part of it, right? And this is the art of team building. I'm saying on this podcast 6 times a week that I think Rob Williams is the Blazers' best center on the roster, but his reality is his reality. He's had trouble staying healthy. And I think this is the tough balance of things. Rob Williams is an effective, talented basketball player who has a history of availability challenges. He just hasn't been able to stay on the court enough and as regularly as he would like. And when he is on the court, he's really impactful, but it's getting on the court that has been hard for him. If he wasn't that, he probably wouldn't be a Trailblazer because they wouldn't have been able to trade for him, right? It's part of the package. Committing to him as at an early stage or whatever stage of the rebuild the Blazers are in comes with some risk. But at some point, and this is listener Sam's sort of question, is like, do you have to commit to saying we need to get good players that can help us now and not worry about assets down the line? And I think this is the art and challenge of team building. Yes, at some point you need to do that. Unless your best trade piece and your most valuable trade piece helps you get things that are in the relatively, you know, not too distant future, not trading for like a 2031 draft pick when you might be fired anyways, but like you're trading for picks that could be helpful in the team in the next, 2 seasons, or trading for young players, young parts. And I think that's been more the Blazers' MO, trading for like the Denny Avdia types. The Blazers sort of, prioritizing young players that could grow with this team. So I think what we've learned over this week is like the Blazers look better without these 2 guys. Undeniable. Small sample size challenges it. Trading them just period is going to be challenging for a variety of reasons. And the Blazers find themselves in a weird spot. They're probably competitive enough to be like plucky every night. I still think just like the Western Conference is so tough, I don't think they have a legitimate shot of making the play-in or anything like that. But like, I think they could hang around in the mix of, not the bottom of the Western Conference, but 11th or 12th or something like that, or 13th where they currently are. They could kind of hang around there. But the balance of team building is, when do you say this group works, let's build forward, or this group works, but we're not quite there? And I think that's the challenge when you look at the Simons and Ayton trades, and that's the challenge with Rob Williams. If he didn't have health concerns, you'd say commit to him. This group works. Here's why it works. For all the reasons I mentioned in the first segment, let's build forward from there because this works. But if it doesn't, and Rob Williams is more valuable as a trade chip, this is the hard truth of team building. Trading good players is how you end up with other good players or good draft picks that turn into good players down the line. And when to balance going for it and saying, this is our group, and committing. And I think you can throw Delano Banton in this boat as well. It's like, when do you commit and say, okay, let's lock in this group and go for it? And when do you try to maintain a level of flexibility by continuing to trade players for youngsters on more team-controlled contracts or draft picks that end up being youngsters on team-controlled contracts? And when do you commit? One of the biggest mistakes the prior regime of the Blazers did was mistaking good fortune for proof of concept. And in 2016, after the Blazers had some good fortune, they quintupled down, sextupled down on a not particularly good roster that had overachieved a little bit. This is the challenge of team building. Not mistaking good fortune 3 freaking games in November with proof of concept, even though it feels like proof of concept. That is the challenge. And that is today's show. Tell your friends about the program. We'll do more of these. Got a couple fun interviews lined up for later this week. Got a remix season preview. Their season opener is this weekend, this Friday. The Blazers G League team. We'll talk a little about Blazers G League team in tomorrow's episode. Blazers play OKC on Wednesday. Then they play 2 games against the Houston Rockets over the weekend, Friday and Saturday. And on a Friday show, Jackson Gatlin of Locked On Rockets is going to join the program, and we are going to talk all about those games. That's what's ahead. We talked about what happens. We looked back to look forward. We got more shows 5 days a week, wherever you get podcasts, and also on YouTube. Tell your friends about the program. I appreciate you listening. I'll talk to you soon.